I really want to welcome Surendran Ithiraj. He is our esteemed speaker today, and he will be enthusiastic, keen on exploring new technical skills. He is very fond to innovate on the upcoming technologies from the angle of software testing. He have owned and developed lot of accelerators, QA services, which will enable companies to achieve shift left and at times shift right. Surendran would be speaking on shift left with AI, ML, quality intelligence. So we right now saw more on the AI, ML, and he will talk more detail on the shift left approach. You can get more details in the below link. And then I hand over to Surendran. You can share your screen.
Thank you, Nimesh. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah.
Just give me a second. Just let me know if you guys are able to see the screen.
Yes, we can see this.
Thanks, Nimesh. Nimesh, we still have 3 minutes. Should we wait on or should we go ahead?
We can go ahead because we did not have any questions. You can go ahead, no problem. It's okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much. Very hearty good evening to everyone present here. It's indeed a pleasure for me to be part of ATA GTR 2020. I've been associated with them quite a long time from now, and yeah, they have been very much supportive. So I just wanted to, before I start, I just wanted to say thank you very much for the opportunity, Aditya and Harsh and the team, for giving me the opportunity to speak over. Yeah, thanks again. Okay. I think Nimesh did speak about myself. I'm Surendran Ithiraj. I work as a senior technical architect in SDET platform in BlueCoach Technologies, earlier called Expansion. And right now I'm heading the innovation practice in BlueCoach Technology, where the major focus area has been around doing shift left with AI/ML. With that context, probably I'll go to the agenda. We'll just see what we're going to see today. So the points for discussion or the agenda for this meeting is, to speak about, how did we ideate, how we went ahead with AI and ML testing. Because my first point of agenda was earlier that, to speak to you about, the importance of AI, ML, etc. With the sessions and with the people, the other speakers speaking about it, I'm pretty sure every one of you understand how AI, ML is evolving testing as a practice, as a process, or as an add-on, or as library, whatever the way you wanted to call for. So so the importance is well known for you guys. So I'll just take a little bit diversion over it. I'm not going, I'll probably put a disclaimer here and say that, I'm not going to talk about specific particular library or particular tool. What we are going to speak about is something which we do day to day, and how we can bring AI/ML onto a day-to-day testing, right? And what sort of AI/ML we can do, and what are the benefits we can do. I'm not going to go in depth in terms of the data science and other aspects. What we are going to see, what is industry is basically is talking when it wanted, when we say AI/ML in testing. So what are the expectations? Where there are a lot of expectations, a lot of them. I have tried to summarize it so in the first slides, and the various tools which will help you to achieve those AI/ML aspects of it. And I have my own point of view, and that's what I call quality intelligence. I will that's the topic here, so probably I will emphasis more on that. And the third is we'll see a live demo of our some of the accelerators we have, and we will probably try to build an accelerator, and see is it making sense. And the last and the final is where are we heading towards. it's completely, I think your feedback and your point of discussion, like the questions, or suggestions is always welcome. So again, I'll quickly move to the next slide. Okay. So as I said, when we speak about AI/ML, there are a lot of things comes into picture, and what I have done is basically did a small analysis over, what does the industry is expecting when I say AI/ML, what are the areas, and how can I classify those areas. So I did an ML on the data which I got, and I classified the data into 6 different categories. So like when I say, so the 6 categories are continuous testing, visual testing, scalable test and extendable coverage, very important, API coverage separately because there's a lot of emphasis on the API, where the test data, the synthetic test data and everything also covers as part of your API coverage. And the last two is very well known. Industry is like showcase these two as the AI products, like predictive analysis and codeless automation, or codeless or less code automation, or you have different tools for that. Before we jump into all these tools and etc. Let me just quickly wrap up what is industry is expecting in each and every in the classification we have. Let me start from the bottom too, because that's something very commonly said by most of the experts, and most of the company are basically yeah, hello, yeah, major of the company are actually putting their money on these two on the bottom of the screen. So the predictive analysis basically wants to know like where we are heading in terms of testing. You wanted to talk about the predictive nature with a model in place. We have in reportportal.io, or Sauce Labs has its own the predictive algorithm, which actually helps you to start predicting and tell that like what are test cases that might be failure, what are test cases could be successful next time when you run. And they start predicting, like even sea lights for that matter, they start predicting and telling you what are the functional areas where you need to focus on. In the right hand side, when you speak about codeless automation or no code or less code automation, the way you wanted to name it, they speak about the self reliability of the tool, and automatically doing a self healing concept, having an ID in picture, trying to convert that into scripts and do a CI/CD integrations. So there you have emphasis on the self healing capability. And if you ask me my perspective, it's still a gray area for me. The reason why I'm saying it's a gray area is like there's a huge dependency, or on that particular tool, or on that particular library which they are using. So you're not doing codeless automation on Selenium script which you can right away use it. So there is a hook there. So but still they have the ability to do the self healing and etc. And when I move up, when I see this, when I talk about the scalable test and extendable coverage, where the cloud platforms come into picture, where you extend your scalability of your test, and extend the coverage by cross browser, or OS browser combinations, or increase where your Docker instances come into picture, use your own cloud, and run it in parallel, or extend the coverage by having more test cases, or with respect to the data, etc. And also the environment which you're having, the industry expecting AI to augment that. If I say I have my own let's say browser stack or pCloudy for Sauce Labs, I've just highlighted few, but they want a mechanism where when my demand increases, automatically my environment should also increase. And so and also with respect to the analytics, like Google Analytics or any other analytical engines they process with, they want AI to set and run the test cases across your the respective analytical identifications you have done. So that's where the extendable coverage comes into picture. In the right hand side, when you talk about API coverage, the reason why we have specified API coverage separately is like APIs are, like the integration and the unit testing layer or the exposure of your service have become more and more, especially when you're going towards the IoT or going towards a blockchain kind of environment where you are exposing your services more and more. So here your test data comes in differently, your request type comes differently. So we need tools like, Ready API or C-Lights, like where they give the synthetic test data with respect to the customer or with respect to the to the input which you have. So industry is expecting AI to automatically generate those data. At the same time, understand how much of coverage you have done from my service layer perspective. What is the extent of services you have covered, what is not covered as part of the service. So all those things, they want AI to argument and tell them. And the last two is continuous testing and visual testing. When you talk about continuous testing, like you have tools like Zypher integration, Zira X-ray integration, connecting with Bamboo, or do with Test Sigma, where with respect to the check-ins, with respect to your, the issues or errors or bugs which are being filed runtime, they want the testing to happen accordingly. So basically, continuous testing will be along with your development as well. So whenever there's a change in the particular piece of code, with respect to that, you have certain set of test cases which are you're marked on. It automatically needs to be triggered and given you results or update the results on the respective test management tools or product management tools. So there is a continuous process improvement here, and they want AI, or here I would say more of a cognitive as well as a little bit on the rules side, where the continuous testing comes into picture. Last is your visual testing. Very well renowned. Like you have Applet Tools, Percy, where you talk about the visual, the applications, visual appearances, whether you have any resolution issues or whether you have any, you're not bound to with respect to, if you take APM, you have the AI tag right now. So by AI, so where you have a neural network, you have multiple images, and and when you change the image with respect to image, your functional test starts working. So the functionality is increasing with respect to different AI mechanisms over these kind of tools. So this is exactly what the industry is looking forward when you talk about AI. And when you talk about AI in testing, and where AI have to augment all these processes to make the quality better. I'm making a pause here to understand, to just have a look at again. So whatever we are seeing, everything has two aspects to it. One is they are independent tools, right? Of course, there are some platforms as well, like C-Lights and Sauce Labs, etc. But still, either they are expensive or you go with different tools, right? And there is no unified platform. That's one point which I wanted to make. And the second point which I wanted to make is, they all talk about functional aspects of your application testing. There is no non-functional aspects of application testing. And are they doing a shift left with this kind of approach? No. Why we require shift left is something, everybody now in the industry speaks about it, because shift left enables you to, better your quality of your application in a much quicker and a faster way. So doing shift left is something, is a goal for many of the organizations right now. So when you work with different tools, but there is no shift left approach here, right? Even though you do a CI integration, etc., how are you feeding it back to the your developer? How are you indicating it? How do he know how to prioritize? And how are you predicting it, right? The prediction probably is limited here, but what can we expand the prediction? So these are some thoughts which came into my mind, and that's what exactly I spoke to my company, Bluecoins Technologies. So they gave an opportunity for me to do an exploration, and fortunately I was trying to do that, and that's where my point of view is quality intelligence as a concept born. So the when I say quality intelligence, basically increasing the quality of your application with some intelligence. So here the intelligence here, talks about the machine learned algorithm, right? I'm not again talking about a particular model, right? So I'm not talking about a particular library here. I'm talking about more of a conceptual behavior here. So you need to educate, or you need to do the prediction, prioritization, or error capturing, whatever you want to call, to do shift left with some quantitative analytical background, and that's exactly what we call it as quality intelligence. So how do we do that? Right, as you could see, whatever data you are getting, so whichever tool might be using, right, it's not necessary that you'll be using all the tools, or you might not be necessary that like you have to go and stick to a platform. You can be more flexible in search of your tool, because different projects require different types of tools. So what do we then, how we can combine together, and how we can bring it up, everything in a single platform? So that's where the time series database comes into picture. Okay, so what is a time series database? So let's give an example, or let's take an example. Let's say that I have done a codeless automation, I have done a self-healing capability, and I've told that, hey, I have changed X locator in your page object login. So you need to basically reciprocate that, or you need to replace it, right? Or there is some kind of indication. So if I club it together in a wholesome package, what are the places my application has changed, I would be able to get from that. So how would I be able to get those data even despite the data being there? That's exactly where time series database is going to help me out. It gives me a cumulative understanding of how my application is behaving on various aspects, including non-functional aspect as well, if you want to bring it to, right? So it beautifully integrates the outputs from different tools. It integrates with respect to we call it as QA accelerators. So in Bluecoins, the QA accelerators basically are nothing but ingestion tools, for different tools, or different, they ingest the data to the time series database, and they start doing the processing of it, so in a meaningful way. So that's where the quality QA accelerators come into picture. So they take in the data, you do a normal Selenium execution, or use a different tool to execute. You use Troska, fine. You get the report. We try to convert that report into a meaningful data, and we ingest that to the time series database. And in the time series database, we apply the logic of autoregressive models. Now I'm talking about the models. Again, I said models because when you say autoregressive has a lot of models, right? Which suits you, that's something which I'll leave up to you. It's a point of discussion as well. But an autoregressive model with the time series data would be fruitful for you to start predicting in a better way over the time period. At the same time, having a wholesome data, having all the data together in a single or multiple databases, or a single index, we call it as a node, or a cluster in a time series. So when you have that, it helps you to start prioritizing and knowing the in leading a way to an opportunity creation, like what I need to focus what is my point of focus for different user roles. It could be a manager, what he needs to do can be determined. If he's a developer, he knows if he's a tester, what he needs to do can be prioritized. The prioritization will be different for different people. That can be easily accomplished with the help of this kind of concept. So I'll take a pause here. If you have any questions over the concept, this is the important slide of this presentation. Probably we can discuss it.
We can take. So we have right at the end.
Okay. Okay, Ramesh. Fine. We'll do it. Okay, I think let's quickly jump to a intelligence demo. What we're going to see is a connection through NLP. Okay, the reason why the connection through NLP of a QA accelerators is to ensure and make sure that when you say NLP, it ensures that you can basically trigger these mechanisms with an API call. Okay. So don't go with the NLP. NLP can be anything. You can merge it with your Alexa, you can merge it with your Slack bot, or you merge it with your Google Home, or you merge it with your own NLP engine. That's completely fine. NLP is just it's a methodology. What we need to focus more on, the process happens and the triggering mechanism which happens and what exactly you end up as results. Yep. With that, I'll just show the demo. This is the virtual assistants we have.
Hello.
I hope you can hear the virtual assistant voice. Surendran.
Yes, Surendran, we can hear that.
We can hear.
Thank you.
Hello, Surendra.
What are you? How could you help me?
I am trained to analyze web pages in terms of non-functional requirements. Also, I could help you create test automation frameworks.
Explain me non-functional testing.
Non-functional testing is defined as a type of software testing to check non-functional aspects, performance, usability, reliability, etc., of a software application. If you want to try it out, say launch Web Analyzer.
So I'll just make a pause here. So what we are trying to do is it's a normal NLP engine. That's the example right now. Whatever you're seeing, you are interacting with the virtual assistants. It's basically trying to invoke the services, right? Which is basically our QI services, which are invoked through API calls, right? So that, the reason why we are saying it is, when I'm able to invoke it through an API service, I can easily integrate with your test automation suite. Either it could be in any language or any, any platform. We still be able to, extend it. That's the intention of it. And let me just quickly, I'll just come to the focus point on the shift left in AI. Launch Web Analyzer.
Application. Browser, type in your application URL.
So I have provided the URL, ask Google, asking it to scan the page. So it is basically doing the scan for me. And once it scans, it basically process the data, the outcome of what is being processed into
analysis done successfully
into a time series database.
Successfully stopped engine. Generated report. Please refer the Kibana page analyzer dashboard.
So now this is where exactly what this topic is all about. So basically whatever we have done, it has been pushed to a time series database where you do the extensive analysis of your application, right? The data, the outcome gets ingested and you get scorings with respect to NFR, functional, everything can be taken out from there, and there you can have the predicting model with respect to whatever modeling you have, right? The autoregressive model which I spoke to you. The autoregressive model basically works fantastically when you have more coefficients and increase the more number of times you have executed, the prediction starts better. So as you could see, this is basically on the performance accessibility on the NFR side as well, which is again part of our point of view, the quality intelligence point of view, not only functional. We also have a functional
G with Selenium and 5% to 10% people go for Junit with Selenium. Created framework would be saved under the Scribble folder.
So now you also have an example of running your normal Selenium test automation script or any tool automation script. Again, you ingest the data, whatever you are executed. So there's no change in your process. You're just adding an additional step to your process to ensure that you have this mindset of shift lefting with the proper intelligence, right? So yeah, so you could see again another dashboard which actually talks about the defect classification. You talk about the trend analysis. You talk about the predictive nature of your dashboard. Like whether my test cases will be pass next time or fail next time, and how much is my percentage and which of my categories are actually failing. So this kind of dashboarding will actually help not only testers, because as a test automation guy, the biggest problem is like more and more test cases I have, the complexity of analyzing the dashboard, analyzing the errors, where exactly most test cases have fallen, and where exactly your is it a script issue or is it a product bug? These kind of questions starts popping up. So defect classification, again, as a separate model can be implemented, but to start with, these are very simplistic approaches, but in a very effective way, you are actually achieving the shift left. And this can be integrated with notification engines, right, which will enable you to get notifications on Slack or in your email or in an SMS or a WhatsApp, whatnot, in any of your communication channel. So this as a wholesome is a good start towards the future of your testing, right, which we will see. With this, I will just quickly go to the slide again. Okay, now we have spoken a lot about QA accelerators. I thought, let me just take a sample of one of the accelerators and see, like how it can be helpful for us and how we can predict it and easily, right? Let's take, you have your automation script. I'm pretty sure many of you understand how report.io works, right? It's on a similar basis, right? Let's say that we have this automation script you have, and you can probably write a listener extension for respective unit test. It could be a TestLatex, sorry, it could be a TestNG, or it could be your JUnit, or it could be your BDD, or whatever the unit testing framework you have underneath with. And basically the reports can be easily understandable, that whether the test case is successful or it's a failure. If it's a failure, what type of failure, you can start classifying it. And you basically, along with that, with the code repository, what changes you had made on the code, and was there any bugs related to that on the respective pages or in the respective in the line of code, right? So you can have those coefficients along with the actual results. You put it into the to a time series model, like you can have ELK, or you can use InfluxDB, or if you want to go with SQL and Tableau, you can still go for that. That is completely up to you. So once you do it and do an auto-regressive approach, you basically start getting and pointing out an hands-free analysis of your test automation. You can classify your test failures as per your needs, because you are the better person. You can bring in the angle of the network lag as well if required to. How was your CPU on the particular agent which you are running, and that will also let you know where there is an issue in loading my in my web page or a on my mobile or etc. Right. At the same time, you can easily get the traceability. When I say traceability here is like to understand the defect management integrations. Okay, this defect is already created, this defect is not created. So that traceability can also bring in. And with this auto-regressive, you can bring up the prediction with this on this. Like, let me just give an example. Let's have a small, very simple prediction of using probability. Let's say I have 5 test cases: test case 1, test case 2, test case 3, test case 4, test case 5. Right? I have run the 5 test cases. Let's say I have run it for 5 different times, and out of those 5 different times, test case 3 and test case 5 fails all the time. So my simple probability math says that next time, and when I'm basically trying to run it, it is expected to fail because it has never passed at all, right? And let's say test case 4 has passed only once or twice, right? And that too recently, the last execution it has got passed. So there is a scope of the 4th test case to pass next time, right? So this is a simple probability math which you bring, and when you integrate that with your code repository and with respect to your page or your API service or whatnot, right? When you try to do the integration with it, we call it as coefficient in model, right? It's been called as coefficient in model. So when you do that, you start predicting in a much better way. Yes, this particular page had had some changes. There's a GUI HTML change in it, or a JSP change on it, or whatever the Angular change in it. So so I'm expecting XYZ pages to be changed. So you start predicting with that as well. So along with your normal probability math, when you bring in the coefficients, you start doing and with your prehistoric data, you start doing the prediction easily. And the last is the prioritization. So when you talk about cumulative sum, you easily, and you have classified your defects, you can easily prioritize, like what exactly the issue was, and which one will actually enable me to basically, if I make this change, it will impact what will be the impact, the number of test cases will impact. That will determine your prioritization on the test cases. Now, this is an example of a QA accelerator, and you can have these kind of accelerators, developed with respect to different tools, and you can have this as an approach to increase the prediction and bring in the AI ML along with your normal live testing, right? Okay, this is, where are we heading towards? Why are we thinking so much of AI ML? Why are we saying that the shift left is going to be the right approach? And this is something which I got from one of the persons whom I follow, Tariq King, from Test.ai. He's a sole person who's an intelligent person on the Test.ai. He has developed a lot of components for especially on the machine learning side for Test.ai. So he has portrayed that right now we are in a phase where we are trying to do things quicker, and we would be coming to the phase where we would be more thoughtfulness, trying to act accordingly with respect to some thoughtful, and eventually we become contextual. So it is basically how you are computing the data which you have, and I agree to that, and that's the reason I have put it in my slide. And as I also feel, the bottom line is the AI is already altering the landscape of our testing, and we don't know exactly where the future of testing holds to, right? And so what we can do is, whatever we are trying to do, we can stabilize it and scale the test automation to mature our processes which we are following with a bit of intelligence. And that's where quality intelligence as a concept holds and comes true for you. Yes, I think I'm done with the session, and thank you very much again for the opportunity. And before I end up, I would like to thank BlueConch Technologies, Ram and Sagar, who has actually promoted and me to go ahead and do the required analysis for BlueConch. And also I wanted to thank my mentors Mukund, Sandeep, Rud. So they helped me and motivated me to explore these kind of areas. Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for your patient listening. I hope it made sense for you, and I'm ready for the question and answers.
Yeah, we'll take one question. We'll take one question. You see on screen right now, it's about shift lefting talk, lot of industry. Where do we stand right now in that, implementing and adopting shift left? So
just give me a second. Yeah.
Hi Surendran, good evening. So I wanted to ask you on this. So I have posted a question, so I thought of posting it directly on Slido. Maybe if you can answer that.
Sure. So Harsh, you're saying that where do we stand today in implementing or adopting shift left?
Yeah, because I specifically mentioned it in quotes, so it's like we have been talking it, but it's like is it really being implemented, or where do we stand today exactly in that scenarios?
Harsh, actually, if you ask me, it's been on greenfields environments, the shift left approach right away gets started. The problem why we are saying that, we haven't doing a lot of shift left, just because of the fact that, many bigger organizations, which we have, they don't, it's a cultural change which you need to do, right? When you say shift lefting, it's a cultural change. There is a lot of teams who need to undergo that particular as a process, right? There should be a good coordination between the development team, the BAs and the product owners. They also should come into agreement to basically do the shift left. So if you really ask me where do we stand today, I really feel that there are many companies, especially smaller scale companies, and they started doing this shift left in a broader scale. Yes, and there are bigger companies as well who have also started. It's just a cultural shift, And if your team is ready for the shift, I think you cannot, you need to go and adopt shift left. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, Surendran, pretty much. So if you allow me, I have a follow-up on that.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so it's like the technological landscape is changing pretty fast, right? You showed the graph as well at the end. So it's like we have a lot of new technologies coming up, but it's like on the cultural side, can we all agree that the transition is slow? So it's like technologically we are moving very fast, but on the culturally and the mindset side, we are adopting to changes very slow. What's your take on that?
I agree with you, and I feel that in the major reason behind it is, how let me just put it this way. When I started, when I wanted to, I had the interest of going with AI/ML in testing, but the biggest problem which I had was like where to start with. That's the question we need to answer to. And Harsh, as rightly pointed out, this actually should come within, and we should not be scared about trying it out and failing, and that's the right track towards where we wanted to go, or where the cultural shift should come. So I think more of it's within us that like we need to come over that fear of failing. So if we do that, then the cultural shift will automatically come into picture. That's what my take on it.
Thank you so much, Surendran. I think there is one more question which has popped up now. I think if Nimish can read it up for you, or maybe
Yeah.
Nimish, you can just zoom in so that Surendran can also read from the screen.
Okay, I can just zoom in. Okay, so can you see now? There's a question.
Yes. Yeah. So the question says, can you please explain on how you have used defect triage or predictiveness with respect to non-functional testing? More on functional testing. No, actually, in the demo, if you could see, the first one talked about the performance, the end user performance and accessibility. They also come from a non-functional testing perspective as well. When you talk about the defect triaging, right? So it will be distinguished between different teams, right? So as I said, when you're bringing a model, the more coefficients you bring in, the better triaging will start happening. Excuse me. So you need to basically train the model in order to ensure that you have it in a better way, and the triaging is autonomous, right? So first time, second time, third time when you train it, the fourth time the model understands that it automatically should fall in this particular bracket. So the triaging and the prediction becomes much better with respect to the more and more the training you do to the modeling. So it's all on not that the initial first of 4 or 5 runs you get the correct accurate results, especially when you talk about AI/ML, especially on ML, you need to train the model better. So in order to train the model better, you need to run it multiple times so that it understands better and it starts predicting in a better and efficient way.
Okay, great. Then we will. I'll just formally thank you, Sunendra, for your great talk actually, and a lot of insights on how to start with AI/ML shift left. So thank you, Surendran.
It's a pleasure again. It's a pleasure and honor. Thank you very much.